Clara, Belle Winslow, dropped to her knees in the mud outside Bitter Creek's general store, her youngest child limp in her arms. 9 hungry faces stared at her. No money, no food, no hope. "Please," she whispered to the shopkeeper blocking the door. "Just some bread. I'll work for it. I'll scrub your floors. Anything." He spat at her feet. "We don't serve your kind here, woman. Take your brood and get." That's when the tall stranger stepped out of the shadows. Stay with me until the end of this story, and comment below what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Clara's journey travels across the world. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss what happens next. The August sun beat down on Bitter Creek, Wyoming territory, like God himself was angry at the earth. Clara Belle Winslow had been walking for 3 days since the wagon wheel broke, carrying 3-year-old Benny on her hip, while her other 8 children trudged behind her like a line of broken soldiers. "Mama!" Maggie's voice was hoarse from thirst. "Benny needs water. We all need water." "I know, baby." Clara shifted the boy's weight, feeling her arms scream in protest. "Just a little further. See those buildings up ahead? That's a town. There'll be water there." "You said that about the last place," Ruth muttered. "They ran us off before we could even fill our canteens." "Ruth." Clara's voice carried warning despite her exhaustion. "Enough." "She ain't wrong, Mama." Sam walked beside her, his 12-year-old shoulders squared like he was trying to be the man of the family. "Every town's been the same. They take one look at us and decide we're trouble." Clara didn't answer. She couldn't argue with truth. Behind her, she heard Faith start to cry. The 5-year-old had stopped crying days ago, which meant things were getting worse, not better. Hope, 9 years old and living up to her name, immediately moved to comfort her little sister. "It's okay, Faith. Mama's gonna find us food. She always does." Clara's heart cracked a little more. She'd been promising food for 2 days now. Her children believed in her, and she was failing them. "Josie," Clara called to her 15-year-old. "Help Patience with Faith. Maggie, take Benny for a spell." "Yes, Mama." The children shifted without complaint, redistributing their burdens the way they'd learned to do over 500 miles of running. Clara's arms were finally free, and she used the moment to wipe the sweat from her face and count her children again. Margaret Josephine, Ruth Patience, Hope Charity Faith, Samuel Benjamin. All 9 still breathing. All 9 still walking. That was something. Charity tugged at Clara's skirt. The 7-year-old hadn't spoken more than a handful of words since they'd fled Missouri. Since she'd watched her father backhand Clara across the kitchen for burning his supper. Since she'd hidden under the bed while Horace Winslow screamed that Clara was worthless, that all her daughters were worthless, that he should have drowned them at birth like unwanted kittens. "What is it, sweetheart?" Clara knelt down despite her aching knees. Charity just pointed at the town ahead, her blue eyes wide with something that might have been fear or hope. With this child, it was hard to tell anymore. "I know you're scared." Clara cupped her daughter's thin face. "But Mama's here. Mama won't let anything bad happen. You understand?" Charity nodded, but she moved closer to Clara's side, her small hand gripping the worn fabric of her mother's dress. They walked into Bitter Creek just as the church bell struck noon. Clara had hoped the timing might work in their favor. People were generally kinder when their bellies were full. But the faces that turned toward them held no kindness. A woman in a fine blue dress stopped mid-stride, her mouth falling open. "Good Lord, look at them all." "Like a plague of locusts," her companion muttered. Clara kept walking, her chin high, her hand tight around Charity's. She'd learned long ago that showing weakness only invited more cruelty. The streets of Bitter Creek weren't much different from any other frontier town. One main road, a handful of buildings, and too many eyes watching the stranger and her brood of children. The general store stood at the center of town. Hawkins Mercantile, the sign read. Clara made for it with determination she didn't feel. Mama! Maggie fell into step beside her. Maybe I should go in alone. They might be kinder to just one of us. No. Clara's voice was firm. We stay together. Always. But, together, Margaret. That's not up for discussion. The bell above the door jangled as Clara pushed inside her children, filing in behind her. The shop was well stocked, the shelves lined with goods that made Clara's empty stomach clench with longing. Flour, sugar, coffee, canned peaches. Things she hadn't been able to give her children for weeks now. Behind the counter stood a woman about Clara's age, her brown hair pulled back in a practical bun, her apron clean and pressed. She looked up at the sound of the bell, and her expression shifted from welcome to wariness as the children kept coming. Can I help you? Her voice was carefully neutral. Yes, ma'am. Clara approached the counter, painfully aware of how she must look. Dress torn and stained from travel, hair escaping its braid, face gaunt from hunger. I'm looking for work. Any kind of work. I can cook, clean, sew, tend animals. I'm strong and I'm willing. The woman's eyes moved over the line of children behind Clara. Counting, her lips pressed together. That's a lot of mouths to feed. I know, ma'am, but I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for honest work. We don't have any work here. Perhaps you know someone who does, anyone in town who might need help. The woman shook her head slowly. Times are hard. Most folks can barely feed their own families. I understand. Clara's throat tightened, but she forced herself to continue. Then perhaps just some bread, a little flour I have. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the last coins she possessed. 3 pennies. Everything she had left in the world. I can pay something. The woman looked at the coins, then at Clara's face, then at the children. For a moment, something like sympathy flickered in her eyes. Then it disappeared behind a wall of practiced indifference. I'm sorry. I can't help you. Please. Clara hated the begging in her voice, but Benny hadn't eaten since yesterday morning, and Faith had started swaying on her feet. Just something small. Anything. The front door opened behind them, and a man's voice boomed through the store. Eleanor, I need to speak with you about the... He stopped mid-sentence. What in God's name is this? Clara turned to face a portly man with a red face and expensive clothes. The mayor, if she had to guess. Or someone who thought he was just as important. Just some travelers, Mr. Hawkins. The woman Eleanor came around the counter. They were just leaving. Travelers. The man looked at Clara's children like they were vermin. More like vagrants. Where's your husband, woman? Dead, sir. And you thought you'd come here looking for handouts. Bitter Creek isn't a charity house for every widow with her handout. I'm looking for work, not handouts. Work. He laughed ugly and sharp. Who'd hire a woman with 9 brats trailing behind her? You'd spend more time tending to them than doing any real labor. Why? Ruth stepped forward, her 13-year-old face flushed with anger. Don't talk to our mama like that. Ruth. Clara's voice was sharp. Be still. No, mama. He can't. I said be still. Ruth fell silent, but her eyes blazed with fury. Clara turned back to the man, forcing her voice to remain calm. Sir, my children and I have been traveling a long way. We're not looking for trouble. If there's no work to be had here, we'll move on. But I'm asking, please, just a little bread. Some water for the children. I can pay. She held out her 3 pennies. The man looked at them like she'd offered him garbage. 3 cents. For 9 children. Do you take me for a fool? No, sir, Get out. He stepped toward her, and Clara instinctively moved back, positioning herself between him and her children. Get out of my store, and get out of my town. We don't need your kind here. Our kind? Maggie's voice was sharp. What kind is that, sir? The hungry kind? The desperate kind? Margaret. Clara's warning was losing its effect. Her children had been pushed too far, too many times. The kind that brings trouble. The man jabbed a finger at them. I've seen it before. One widow shows up and suddenly we've got beggars on every corner. No, not in my town. Not while I'm still breathing. We're not beggars, Sam said, stepping forward to stand beside his mother. We're a family looking for a fresh start, that's all. A fresh start? The man's laugh was cruel. A woman alone with 9 children. The only fresh start you'll find is in a grave. Clara felt something break inside her. The same thing that had been cracking piece by piece since Horace first raised his hand to her. Since she'd found out about his debts. Since Victor Crane had told her exactly how she'd be expected to pay them. But she couldn't break. Not here. Not in front of her children. We'll go, she said quietly. We don't want any trouble. See that you do, and don't let me catch you back in this town, or I'll have the sheriff run you out. Clara gathered her children with her eyes and turned toward the door. She could feel their humiliation, their anger, their fear. She could feel Charity trembling against her side and Faith crying silently. She could feel Sam's rage and Maggie's helpless fury. She pushed open the door and stepped outside the August sun, hitting her like a physical blow. Her vision swam from hunger and exhaustion. Her knees felt weak. But she kept walking, leading her children away from the store, away from the watching eyes, away from another town that didn't want them. They made it to the edge of town before Clara's legs gave out. She didn't fall gracefully. One moment she was walking, and the next she was on her knees in the dirt. Charity's hand torn from hers. Benny's weight suddenly too much to bear. The baby tumbled from her arms and started to wail. Mama! Maggie was there in an instant, catching Benny before he hit the ground. Mama, what's wrong? I'm fine. Clara tried to stand, but her body refused. I just need a moment. You're not fine. Ruth knelt beside her, her earlier anger replaced with fear. When did you last eat Mama real food, not scraps? Clara couldn't remember. She'd been giving her portions to the children for days now, making sure they had something in their bellies while hers stayed empty. That's what I thought. Ruth's voice cracked. You stupid, stubborn woman. You've been starving yourself for us. Language, Ruth. I don't care about language. I care about you. Me too, Mama. Faith had stopped crying and come to Clara's side. Please don't die. Please don't leave us like Papa did. The words hit Clara harder than any blow Horace had ever dealt. She looked at her youngest daughter's tear-streaked face, at the terror in her eyes, and felt her heart shatter completely. I'm not going anywhere, baby. She pulled Faith close with what little strength she had left. Mama's just tired. Mama just needs to rest for a minute. We need to find shade. Maggie took charge, her voice steady, despite the fear in her eyes. Josie, take the little ones over to those trees. Sam, help me get Mama up. I can walk. Clara protested, but her children ignored her. Sam got on one side, Maggie on the other, and together they lifted their mother to her feet. Clara's pride stung, but she was too weak to fight them. They half-carried her to the small cluster of cottonwoods at the edge of town, settling her against a trunk where the shade offered relief from the brutal sun. What are we going to do? Patience asked her 11-year-old face, far too serious for her age. We can't stay here. That man said he'd call the sheriff. We keep going, Josie said quietly. Like we always do. There's got to be another town down the road. And what if they run us off too? Ruth demanded. What if every town's the same? We can't walk forever. Mama can't walk at all. I can walk, Clara said weakly. You can barely sit up. Ruth turned away, her shoulders shaking. This is hopeless. Everything's hopeless. Don't say that. Hope, 9 years old, with her mother's auburn hair and her father's stubborn chin, moved to Ruth's side. It's never hopeless. We just have to keep believing. Believing in what? I don't know. Something. Anything. Clara closed her eyes, listening to her children argue about hope and despair, faith and reality. She'd brought them 500 miles from Missouri. She'd kept them fed and alive through storms and heat and hostile strangers. She'd done everything in her power to give them a chance, and it still wasn't enough. She must have drifted off because the next thing she heard was Maggie's voice, sharp with alarm. "Someone's coming." Clara's eyes flew open. She struggled to sit up straighter, instinctively pulling Faith and Charity closer. Through the cottonwood branches, she could see a figure approaching on horseback. A man tall in the saddle, riding with the easy confidence of someone who belonged here. "Stay behind me," Clara ordered her children, though she could barely stand. "All of you, stay behind me." The rider drew closer, and Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. He was big, well over 6 feet, with shoulders broad enough to block the sun. His face was weathered and serious, marked by a scar along his left arm, visible below his rolled-up sleeves. He wore the clothes of a working rancher, nothing fancy but well-maintained. He stopped his horse a respectful distance away and dismounted with the fluid grace of a man who'd spent his life in the saddle. "Ma'am." He removed his hat, revealing dark hair shot through with silver at the temples. His eyes were gray, the color of storm clouds, and they moved over Clara and her children with an expression she couldn't read. "I don't mean to intrude, but I saw what happened in town. Saw that fool Hawkins run you out." Clara's spine stiffened despite her weakness. "We don't want any trouble, sir. We're just resting before we move on." "I can see that." His voice was low and calm, like he was gentling a spooked horse. "I can also see that moving on isn't something you're in any shape to do right now. We'll manage. Will you?" He looked at her children, counting them the way everyone did, but his expression didn't hold judgment. It held something that might have been concern. 9 children, no supplies, and a mother who can barely stand. Where exactly are you planning to manage to? Sam stepped forward, putting himself between the stranger and Clara. "What's it to you, mister?" The man looked at Sam with what might have been respect. "You're protective of your mother. That's good. A boy should be." "I ain't a boy." "No, I reckon you're not." The stranger's gaze returned to Clara. "Ma'am, my name's Silas Thornton. I own a ranch about 5 miles north of here. I don't know your circumstances, and frankly, they're none of my business. But I've got a barn with a solid roof and a pump that runs clean water. I'm offering you and your children a place to rest for the night. No strings attached." Clara stared at him, waiting for the catch. There was always a catch. "Why would you do that?" "Because it's the right thing to do." He said it simply, like it was obvious. "And because my late wife would haunt me from the grave if I rode past a woman and 9 children in need without offering help. We don't take charity. It's not charity, it's Christian kindness. There's a difference." He paused. "You can pay me back by cooking supper if you're able. I've got a son who's been living on burnt beans for months now. He'd probably fall over dead from shock at the sight of a real meal." Maggie moved to Clara's side. "Mama, maybe we should—" "Margaret, hush." "But Mama, look at Faith. Look at Benny. They need food and rest. We all do." Clara looked at her youngest children. Faith had gone pale and was leaning against Hope like she might fall over. Benny had stopped crying, which was worse. He just lay limp in Josie's arms, too weak even to fuss. She looked back at Silas Thornton, searching his face for any sign of deception. She'd become an expert at reading men since Horace. She'd learned to spot cruelty hiding behind charm, violence lurking beneath kind words. She saw none of that in this man's gray eyes. What she saw was patience and steadiness, and something that looked almost like understanding. "Why?" she asked again. "Why would you help strangers?" Silas was quiet for a moment. Then he said, 3 years ago my wife died. Left me with a son I barely knew how to talk to, and a ranch I barely knew how to run without her. Folks around here helped us. Brought food, checked on the boy, made sure we didn't drown in our own grief." He put his hat back on, shading his eyes from the sun. I figure it's time I paid some of that kindness forward. Ruth, who'd been silent since her outburst, spoke up. And if we come to your ranch and don't like what we find, we can leave. Anytime you want. I'll even drive you to the next town myself if that's what you choose. Clara's children were looking at her, waiting for her decision. 9 faces ranging from 17 to 3, all of them hungry and tired and scared. All of them trusting her to make the right choice. She thought of Horace, who'd promised to love and protect her, and had done neither. She thought of Victor Crane, who'd promised to make her pay her husband's debts one way or another. She thought of every man who'd ever made her a promise and broken it. And she thought of her children who needed food and water and rest more than she needed to protect her pride. One night, she said finally, we'll stay one night, and I'll cook supper. That's the deal. Silas nodded. That's the deal. He didn't offer to help Clara to her feet. Somehow he seemed to understand that she needed to do it herself, needed to prove she was capable, even when she clearly wasn't. She stood on shaking legs, leaning on Sam more than she wanted to admit, and faced the rancher with what dignity she could muster. I have conditions, she said. Name them. My children stay with me at all times. We sleep together, work together. No one separates us. Understood. If any man on your ranch so much as looks at my daughters wrong, we're gone. No explanations, no second chances. I wouldn't expect anything less. And this changes nothing. We're not beggars, and we're not looking for a handout. One night, that's all. Silas studied her for a long moment. Then he said, Ma'am, I don't know what you've been through or who hurt you bad enough to make you this careful, but I give you my word as a man and a father that no harm will come to you or your children under my roof. My word's worth something in these parts. You can ask anyone in town except Hawkins. Clara wanted to believe him. God help her, she wanted to believe that someone could be what they seemed, that kindness could exist without ulterior motive. But she'd been fooled before. We'll see, she said. We'll see. The ride to Silas's ranch was slow, accommodating Clara's weakened state and the children's exhaustion. Silas had arranged for them to ride in shifts on his horse, while he walked alongside, leading the animal with an easy stride that suggested 5 miles was nothing to him. Clara watched him from where she sat with Benny in her arms, trying to figure out his angle. Men always had an angle. Horace had been charming when they'd first met, attentive and kind, and look how that had turned out. Victor Crane had spoken softly and promised understanding right up until he'd explained exactly how Clara would work off her husband's debts. But Silas Thornton didn't try to charm her. He didn't make promises or pretty speeches. He just walked steady and sure, occasionally answering questions from the more curious children with short, honest responses. How big is your ranch, mister? That was Hope, never able to resist asking questions. 500 acres, give or take. That's a lot of land. It is. Do you have horses? A few. Can we ride them? We'll see. His son met them at the gate. Ezra Thornton was 14, tall and gangly, with his father's dark hair and gray eyes. He stared at the parade of children with open confusion. Pa, what's all this? Guests, Ezra. They'll be staying in the barn tonight. The barn. It's clean and dry, which is more than we found them with. Silas's voice was mild but firm. Go tell Jacob to put fresh hay down and make sure the pump's working. Ezra looked like he wanted to argue, but something in his father's expression stopped him. He nodded once and ran toward the barn. Your boy doesn't seem happy about us being here, Maggie observed. Ezra's not happy about much these days. Silas's voice held a note of sadness. He's been struggling since his mother passed. Takes everything personally, sees threats where there aren't any. Sounds familiar, Ruth muttered, earning a sharp look from Clara. The barn was better than Clara had expected. Clean straw covered the floor, and someone had strung up lanterns that cast warm light across the space. There was even a makeshift table set up with a basin of water and some clean cloths. "It's not much," Silas said, watching Clara's face. "But it's dry and warm. There's a pump outside for water and the privy's behind the main house. You're welcome to use the kitchen to cook supper if you're still willing." "I'm willing." Clara was already calculating. 9 children, 1 rancher his son, and whoever Jacob was. That was at least 12 mouths to feed. "What supplies do you have?" "More than we know what to do with. My housekeeper quit 2 months back, and neither Ezra nor I can cook worth a damn. There's flour beans, some salted pork vegetables from the garden. Help yourself to whatever you need." Clara nodded slowly. She was starting to believe against her better judgment that this man meant what he said, that his help came without hidden cost. It terrified her. "Mama." Faith tugged at her sleeve. "I'm hungry." "I know, baby. Mama's going to make supper soon." Clara looked at Silas. "Thank you. For this. For everything." "Don't thank me yet." Was that a hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth? "Wait until you've tasted Ezra's coffee. Then we'll see how grateful you feel." He turned and walked toward the main house, leaving Clara standing in the barn with her 9 children and a fragile, frightening thing growing in her chest. Hope. She'd almost forgotten what it felt like. The first meal Clara cooked in Silas Thornton's kitchen was nothing fancy. Salt pork, fried crisp biscuits made from flour that hadn't been weevil-eaten beans seasoned with onion and a bit of molasses she'd found in the pantry. Simple food, the kind she'd made 1,000 times before Horace drank away their prosperity. But the way Silas and his son looked at those plates, you'd have thought she'd served them a feast fit for a king. "This is..." Ezra paused his fork halfway to his mouth. "This is real food." "It's just biscuits and beans." "Ma'am, you don't understand." The boy actually smiled, and Clara saw a glimpse of the child he must have been before grief hardened him. "Pa's been trying to cook for 3 years. Last week he set water on fire. I didn't even know that was possible." "That's enough, Ezra." But Silas was fighting a smile of his own. "The boy exaggerates." "I do not. Tell her about the porridge incident." "There's no need to. He made porridge so thick we used it to patch a hole in the barn roof. Worked better than actual mortar." Clara's children giggled. Even Ruth, who'd been scowling since they arrived, cracked a reluctant smile. Clara felt something loosen in her chest, some knot of tension she'd been carrying for so long she'd forgotten it was there. "Well," she said, serving seconds to Faith, who was eating like she'd never seen food before. "I suppose it's a good thing I'm here tonight, then." The words hung in the air. Tonight. Just tonight. That was the deal. Silas met her eyes across the table, and something passed between them that Clara couldn't name. Understanding, maybe. Or recognition. 2 people who'd learned not to expect more than they were given. "Yes, ma'am," he said quietly. "I suppose it is." After supper, Clara put her younger children to bed in the barn while Maggie and Josie helped clean the kitchen. She'd insisted on it, refused to leave a mess for someone else to handle. That wasn't how she'd raised her girls. When she returned to the house to collect them, she found Silas on the porch, a cup of coffee in his hands, staring out at the darkening sky. "Your daughters are good workers," he said without turning around. "Thorough. Careful. I taught them to take pride in what they do, no matter how small the task." That's a valuable lesson. He took a sip of his coffee. "More valuable than most, I'd wager." Clara stood awkwardly, unsure whether to stay or go. The easy way he talked to her was unsettling. Men didn't talk to her like this. They talked at her, or over her, or about her. They didn't just converse. "Mr. Thornton." "Silas. Mr. Thornton was my father, and he was a hard man I'd rather not be compared to." "Silas, then." The name felt strange on her tongue. "I want to thank you again. For today. For the food and the shelter. We'll be out of your way come morning." He turned to look at her, then his gray eyes reflecting the last light of sunset. "Where will you go?" "Next town down the road, I suppose. Keep moving until we find somewhere that'll have us." "And if nowhere will have you?" Clara's jaw tightened. "Then we'll keep moving. We've managed this far." "Have you?" His voice wasn't cruel, just honest. "Ma'am, you collapsed in the street today. Your children are half-starved and exhausted. Your youngest boy hasn't made a sound since you got here, which tells me he's either sick or scared or both. That's not managing. That's surviving by the skin of your teeth." "Surviving is enough." "Is it?" He set down his coffee cup and faced her fully. "Is it enough for them, those 9 children who look at you like you hung the moon?" Clara felt anger flare in her chest. "You don't know anything about us, about what we've been through." "You're right, I don't, and I'm not asking you to tell me." He held up a hand before she could respond. "But I know what I saw today. I saw a mother willing to starve herself to feed her children. I saw a family that's been running from something for a long time. And I saw 9 young faces that deserve better than sleeping in ditches and begging for scraps." "We don't beg." "No, you don't. That's part of the problem." His voice softened. "Pride's a fine thing, Mrs. Winslow, but it makes a poor blanket in winter and an even poorer meal." Clara's hands were shaking. She clasped them together to hide it. "What do you want from me? What do you really want?" "I told you. Nothing." "Nobody wants nothing. Everyone has an angle." Silas was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "My wife used to say that people who've been hurt bad enough learn to see danger everywhere, even where it doesn't exist." He picked up his coffee cup again. "I'm not your enemy, Mrs. Winslow. I'm not whoever taught you to be this afraid. I'm just a rancher with more space than he needs, and a conscience that won't let him sleep if he turns away a woman and 9 children." Clara wanted to argue, wanted to throw his words back in his face and march her family out of here tonight, pride intact, independence preserved. But she thought of Benny, who still hadn't spoken, of Faith, who'd eaten until her belly rounded out for the first time in weeks, of Charity, who'd actually fallen asleep without crying. "One more night," she heard herself say. "We'll stay one more night, and I'll cook breakfast to pay for it." "Fair enough. And then we're leaving. If that's what you want." Clara nodded sharply and turned to go. She was halfway to the barn when his voice stopped her. "Mrs. Winslow." She turned back. "Whatever you're running from," Silas said, "it won't find you here. Not while I'm breathing." Clara didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing at all. One night became 2. 2 became 3. Each morning, Clara woke determined to pack her children up and move on, and each morning something stopped her. First it was Benny, who developed a cough that worried her. Then it was Faith, whose blisters from walking hadn't fully healed. Then it was the simple, shameful truth that she was too tired to take another step. Silas never pushed, never asked how long she planned to stay. He just adjusted, making room in his routine for Clara and her brood like they'd always been there. By the 4th day, Clara had reorganized his entire kitchen. "Where's the flour?" Silas asked, opening a cabinet and finding it empty. "Second shelf left side. The old spot got damp." "And the coffee?" "Top shelf away from the heat of the stove." "The sugar?" "Mr. Thornton, if you'd like a map of where I've put things, I'd be happy to draw you one." Clara didn't look up from the bread she was kneading. "Or you could just ask." "Silas." "What?" "You keep calling me Mr. Thornton. I told you that was my father." "And I told you we're not staying. Seems foolish to get familiar." "Does it?" He leaned against the counter watching her work. "Your children seem to think otherwise." Clara's hands stilled. "What do you mean?" "Samuel asked if he could help with the horses this morning. Maggie offered to mend the fence along the north pasture. Even your quiet one, Charity, she sat on the porch and watched me work for an hour without running away." "They're just being polite. They're settling in. Silas's voice was gentle. Whether you want to admit it or not. Clara resumed, needing putting more force into it than necessary. Children adapt. It's what they do. And mothers do what they have to. Silas was quiet for a moment. Then he said, My offer stands, you know. If you want to stay longer, work for wages, room and board for you and the children. It's honest employment, nothing more. You don't need 10 extra mouths to feed. No, but I need a cook who doesn't poison me, a housekeeper who knows the difference between soap and saddle oil, and someone to help with the children during roundup season when I'm gone for days at a time. He pushed off from the counter. Think about it. That's all I ask. He left before Clara could respond. She thought about it. God help her, she thought about little else. The children, as Silas had observed, were settling in with alarming speed. Sam had taken to ranch work like he'd been born to it, following Jacob the ranch hand around and peppering him with questions about cattle and horses and land management. Maggie had appointed herself supervisor of the younger children's education, holding classes in the barn each afternoon. Josie had discovered Silas's small library and was working her way through it with the dedication of someone who'd been starved for books. Even Ruth, prickly Ruth, who trusted no one, had started helping in the kitchen without being asked. But it was Charity who surprised Clara the most. The 7-year-old had been afraid of men since Horace. She flinched at loud voices, hid when strangers came near, and hadn't willingly been in the same room as a man since they'd fled Missouri. Yet here she was, sitting on the porch steps, while Silas worked on a broken harness not 3 feet away from him. Clara watched from the window, her heart in her throat. You don't have to sit there, you know. Silas's voice was casual, focused on his work. If I make you uncomfortable. Charity didn't answer. She rarely did. That's all right. You don't have to talk either. Some folks think silence is a bad thing, but I've always found it peaceful. He held up the harness, examining his repair. My wife used to say I could go a whole day without speaking more than 10 words. She'd count them just to tease me. A small sound from Charity. Not quite a laugh, but close. She was a talker, my Catherine. Could fill a room with words and make you glad to drown in them. Silas's hands stilled for just a moment. I miss that. The talking. The noise of another person. Charity pulled her knees up to her chest, hugging them. It's too quiet now, Silas continued. Just me and Ezra, and that boy's got more silence in him than I do. He resumed working on the harness. So if you want to sit here and not talk, I'd be grateful for the company. Even quiet company is better than none. Clara watched her daughter lean slightly toward the rancher like a flower turning toward unexpected sun. Something cracked open in her chest. Maybe she thought. Maybe. A week after they'd arrived, Clara found Sam behind the barn punching a fence post until his knuckles bled. Samuel Abraham Winslow. Her voice cut through his fury. What in God's name are you doing? Sam whirled to face her. His 12-year-old face twisted with rage and something else. Something that looked terrifyingly like his father. Nothing. That's not nothing. That's you destroying your hands. Clara grabbed his wrists, examining the damage. What happened? I said nothing. And I said don't lie to me. Sam yanked away from her grip. You want to know what happened? Ezra happened. Ezra and his smart mouth and his attitude like he's better than us. What did he say? He called us vagrants. Said we're just passing through using his pa's charity until something better comes along. Sam's voice cracked. Said we're like stray dogs his pa picked up, and everyone knows you can't keep strays. They always leave or die. Clara felt cold anger settle in her stomach. Where is Ezra now? In the house, probably running to his daddy to tell him I tried to hit him. Did you? Wanted to, didn't. Sam's shoulders sagged. Knew you'd be disappointed if I did. Clara pulled her son into her arms, ignoring his half-hearted resistance. He was too old for this, they both knew it. But sometimes, a boy needed his mother no matter how grown he tried to be. I'm proud of you for walking away. Don't feel like something to be proud of. The hardest things rarely do. Clara held him at arm's length, studying his face. Your father had a temper. You know that. And you know where it got him. Sam flinched at the mention of Horace. You are not him, Clara said firmly. You will never be him. But that means making choices he never could. It means walking away when everything in you wants to fight. Ezra deserved to get hit. Maybe. But you deserve to be better than the man who hits him. Sam's eyes were wet, though he'd die before admitting it. I hate it here, Mama. I hate feeling like we don't belong anywhere. I know, baby. I know. Are we ever going to have a home, a real one? Clara thought of the barn where they slept, of the kitchen she'd reorganized, of Silas's steady presence, and Charity's slow emergence from her shell. She thought of the offer that hung between them, unaccepted, but not refused. I'm working on it, she said. I promise you, I'm working on it. She found Silas in his study, a small room off the main hall that smelled of leather and pipe tobacco. He looked up when she knocked on the open door, his expression shifting from surprise to concern when he saw her face. Mrs. Winslow, is something wrong? Your son called my children stray dogs. Silas set down the papers he'd been reading. Ezra? He told Samuel we're charity cases who'll leave or die like strays always do. I see. Silas rose from his chair. Where is my son now? The house somewhere. Hiding, most likely. He's got reason to hide. Silas moved past her, and Clara followed, not about to miss what came next. They found Ezra in the kitchen, pretending to be very interested in a cup of water. The boy looked up when his father entered, and his face went pale. Pa, I can explain. No need. Mrs. Winslow already told me what you said. Silas's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. Is it true? Ezra's jaw tightened. I just said what everyone's thinking. Everyone? Or just you? Come on, Pa. A woman shows up with 9 kids and nowhere to go, and you just take her in. Let her move into our barn, eat our food, use our kitchen. Ezra's voice rose. Mama's only been gone 3 years, and you're already... Careful. The single word stopped Ezra cold. Think very carefully about what you're about to say. I just meant. You meant to hurt people who've done nothing to you. You meant to make children feel unwelcome in a place where I offered them shelter. Silas took a step toward his son. That's not who I raised you to be. Maybe you didn't raise me at all. Ezra's voice cracked. Maybe you were too busy with the ranch and the cattle and everything else to notice I was even here. The words hit like physical blows. Clara saw Silas flinch, saw the pain that flashed across his weathered face. Ezra, forget it. The boy pushed past his father, past Clara, out the door. They heard his boots on the porch, then the sound of running. Silas stood frozen, his back to Clara, his shoulders rigid with tension. I'm sorry, Clara said quietly. I shouldn't have confronted you about this. It's between you and your son. No. Silas turned to face her. You were right to tell me. And Ezra was wrong. I'll make sure he apologizes to your children. He's hurting. I can see that. He's been hurting for 3 years. I keep thinking time will heal it, but... Silas shook his head. Time doesn't heal anything. It just teaches you to hide the wound better. I know something about that. Their eyes met, and for a moment, they were just 2 broken people recognizing each other's cracks. I'm sorry about what he said, Silas continued. About your family being strays. That's not how I see you. How do you see us? The question surprised them both. Clara hadn't meant to ask it, and Silas clearly hadn't expected it. I see a woman who's stronger than she knows, he said slowly. I see children who've been through hell and are still standing. I see a family that deserves a chance to build something good. He paused. And I see the answer to a question I've been asking for 3 years. What question? Whether this house would ever feel like a home again. Clara's breath caught. Silas. I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I know you've got reasons not to trust, reasons I don't know and won't press you about. But I want you to understand something. He took a step toward her. Whatever you're running from, whoever hurt you bad enough to put that fear in your eyes, they don't get to win. Not if you don't let them. It's not that simple. Nothing worth doing ever is. They stood there inches apart, the afternoon light slanting through the windows. Clara could smell leather and soap, and something else, something warm and indefinably male. It had been so long since she'd been this close to a man who didn't make her want to run. Stay, Silas said. Not one more night, not one more week. Stay for real. Let me give you and your children a place to land. Why? Why do you care what happens to us? Because you matter. He said it simply, like it was obvious. Because every person matters, and somewhere along the way, someone made you believe you didn't. I'd like to prove them wrong. Clara's eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. You don't know me. Then let me learn. Before she could respond, the front door burst open. Ruth stood there, her face pale with alarm. Mama, there's a man in town asking about us. Maggie saw him at the general store. He's got a scar on his face, and he's showing people a photograph. Clara's blood went cold. What kind of photograph? Of you, Mama. Of you and us children. Victor Crane had found them. Clara moved before she could think, grabbing Ruth's arm and propelling her toward the door. Get your sisters, get your brothers, everyone in the barn now. Mama, what's happening? Now, Ruth. The girl ran. Clara turned to find Silas watching her, his expression sharp with concern. Who's looking for you? It doesn't matter. We have to leave. The hell you do. Silas blocked her path to the door. Tell me who's looking for you. A man named Victor Crane. He's someone my husband owed money to. Your husband's dead. That doesn't matter to Victor. He wants what he's owed, and if he can't get money... Clara's voice broke. He'll take payment other ways. Understanding dawned in Silas's gray eyes, followed immediately by cold fury. He wants you. He wants all of us, me and the girls at least. He runs. She couldn't say it, couldn't make her mouth form the words. I know what he runs. Silas's voice was deadly quiet. There are men like him in every territory. Men who trade in human misery. Then you understand why I have to leave. If he finds out we're here, he'll come for us. And anyone who gets in his way, let him come. Clara stared at him. You don't understand. He's dangerous. He has men working for him. Men who... I understand perfectly. Silas's hands came up to grip her shoulders, steadying her. I understand that a monster is hunting you and your children. I understand that you've been running for God knows how long, thinking that's the only way to survive. But I'm telling you right now, Clara Bell Winslow, you don't have to run anymore. It was the first time he'd used her given name. The sound of it on his lips did something strange to her heart. You can't fight him. Watch me. He'll kill you. Men have tried before. I'm still here. Silas, please. Clara's voice cracked. I can't. I can't have your death on my conscience. Not after everything. Then stay and help me stop him. How do you stop a man like Victor Crane? Silas's jaw set with determination. The same way you stop any predator. You show him he's not the biggest threat in these parts. You make him understand that hunting here will cost him more than he's willing to pay. And if you're wrong, if he's stronger than you think, then I'll die protecting people who matter. And there are worse ways to go. Clara searched his face, looking for any sign of doubt or deception. She found neither. Just steady certainty and something else. Something that looked like the beginning of war. Why? She whispered. Why would you risk everything for us? Silas's hands tightened on her shoulders. Because you asked me once what I want from you. I told you nothing, and that was true then. But it's not true anymore. What do you want? I want you to stay. I want to watch your children grow up safe and strong. I want to hear you laugh without looking over your shoulder. I want... He stopped seeming to struggle with the words. I want a chance, that's all. Just a chance to prove that not every man is the monster who taught you to be afraid. Clara's tears finally fell. She couldn't stop them. I'm not worth this, she said. I'm not worth dying for. That's where you're wrong. Silas pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her like a shield against the world. You're worth everything, and I'm going to spend as long as it takes proving it to you. Outside, Clara could hear her children gathering in the barn. She could feel the danger closing in the shadow of Victor Crane stretching toward this fragile piece they'd found. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, she wasn't facing it alone. And maybe, just maybe, that made all the difference. The hours after Ruth's warning stretched like years. Clara gathered her children in the barn, counting them twice 3 times, her hands shaking as she touched each face. Mama, you're scaring me. Faith pressed close to her side. What's happening? Nothing, baby. Everything's going to be fine. You're lying. Ruth's voice was flat. You always touch your throat when you lie. Clara's hand dropped from where it had been, unconsciously resting against her pulse. Ruth? Is it him, the man Papa owed money to? The younger children went still. Even Benny, who rarely reacted to anything anymore, seemed to sense the shift in the air. Yes, Clara said. There was no point in lying. Her children had survived too much to be protected by comfortable falsehoods. He's in town, asking questions. Then we run. Sam was already moving toward their meager belongings. Like we always do, we pack up and we go before he finds us. No. Every head turned toward the barn door where Silas stood with a rifle in his hands and steel in his eyes. You're not running anymore, he said. None of you. Mr. Thornton, you don't understand, Maggie started. I understand just fine. A predator's been hunting your family, and you've been running because you thought there was no other choice. Silas stepped into the barn, his presence somehow making the space feel safer. But there's another choice now. You stand, you fight, and you let someone fight alongside you. He has men, Clara said. 3, maybe 4. They're dangerous. So am I. Silas's voice held no boast, just fact. And I'm not alone. Jacob's already riding to the neighboring ranches. By nightfall, I'll have a dozen men here who owe me favors and hate men like Victor Crane. Why would they help us? Ruth demanded. They don't even know us. They know me, and they know what kind of man preys on women and children. Silas looked at Clara. This is cattle country. We protect our own. We're not your own. You are now. The words settled over Clara like a blanket, warm and terrifying in equal measure. She wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to believe. Mama. Charity's small voice broke through Clara's thoughts. The 7-year-old had moved to stand beside Silas, her tiny hand reaching up to grip the fabric of his shirt. I don't want to run anymore. My feet hurt. Something broke in Clara's chest. Her daughter, who couldn't stand to be near men who flinched at shadows and cried in her sleep, was voluntarily touching this man, trusting him. All right, Clara heard herself say. We stay. We fight. Silas nodded once, sharp and decisive. Good. Now here's what's going to happen. The plan was simple, because simple plans were the ones that worked. The children would stay in the main house with Clara and Eleanor Hawkins, whom Silas had sent word to despite her husband's objections. The woman had arrived within the hour, armed with a shotgun and a fierce expression. That fool Harold can rot, Eleanor had said when Clara tried to thank her. I've been ashamed of how we treated you since the day you arrived. Time I did something about it. The men positioned themselves around the property. Jacob and 3 neighboring ranchers covered the approach roads. Silas waited on the porch rifle across his knees, looking for all the world like a man enjoying a quiet evening. Clara watched him through the window, her heart in her throat. "He's something, isn't he?" Eleanor said, coming to stand beside her. "Silas Thornton. Never met a more stubborn man in my life. He's going to get himself killed for us." "Maybe, but he'd rather die standing than live on his knees. Always been that way even before Catherine passed." Eleanor touched Clara's arm gently. "She'd approve, you know. Of you. Of this." "You knew her." "Everyone knew Catherine. She was the heart of this community." Eleanor smiled sadly. "And she'd be the first to tell Silas that a heart can only stay empty so long before it withers. He's been withering for 3 years. Then you came along." Before Clara could respond, Maggie called from across the room. "Mama, something's wrong with Patience." Clara turned to find her 11-year-old daughter slumped in a chair, her face flushed and her breathing shallow. She crossed the room in 3 strides, pressing her hand to Patience's forehead. "She's burning up." "She was fine this morning," Josie said, her voice tight with fear. "She was playing with hope and faith. She seemed fine. Fevers come fast out here." Eleanor was already moving toward the door. "I'll send for Doc Wheeler." "No," Clara's voice cracked. "We can't. If anyone goes to town—" "Doc Wheeler's not in town. He lives 2 miles east, and he's delivered half the babies in this territory. Victor Crane won't know him from Adam." Eleanor was out the door before Clara could argue further. Patience moaned, her eyes fluttering open. "Mama, I don't feel good." "I know, baby, I know." Clara gathered her daughter in her arms, feeling the heat radiating from her small body. "Just rest. The doctor's coming." "Is the bad man coming too?" Clara's throat closed. "Don't worry about that. Just focus on feeling better." "I'm scared, Mama." "I know, but I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." The next hour was the longest of Clara's life. Patience's fever climbed despite the cool cloths Clara pressed to her forehead. The girl drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling about rivers and horses, and a woman in white who kept calling her name. "She's hallucinating," Ruth said grimly. "That's bad, isn't it?" "It just means the fever's high." Clara's voice was steady, even as her hands shook. "Once the doctor gets here—" "What if he doesn't get here in time?" "Ruth, please. What if she dies? What if we stayed here for nothing and Patience dies because we couldn't take her to a real doctor in a real town?" "That's enough." Maggie's voice cut through Ruth's rising hysteria. "You're not helping. Go check on the little ones. Don't tell me what to— Go. Now." Ruth went, but not before throwing a look at Clara that said everything her words hadn't. "This is your fault. You brought us here. If she dies, it's on you." Clara already knew that. She didn't need her daughter to remind her. Doc Wheeler arrived just as Patience's fever reached its peak. He was an older man with kind eyes and steady hands, and he took one look at the sick child before rolling up his sleeves. "Scarlet fever," he said after a brief examination. "Seen a lot of it this season. She needs rest fluids and someone to keep that fever from cooking her brain." "Will she live?" Doc Wheeler met Clara's eyes with unflinching honesty. "If the fever breaks by morning, probably. If it doesn't—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Clara stayed by Patience's side through the long night, alternating cool cloths and prayers. Her other children took turns sitting with her, even little Faith, who held her sister's hand and sang the songs Clara had taught them when they were small. Silas came inside once, his face drawn with worry. "Any change?" Clara shook her head, not trusting her voice. Jacob spotted riders on the east road. 3 men moving slow. They're checking the ranches, asking questions. "How long?" "A few hours, maybe. They'll reach us by dawn." Clara looked at her daughter fighting for her life in a borrowed bed and felt something harden in her chest. She'd spent so long running. So long being afraid. So long letting men like Victor Crane define her existence. No more. When they come, she said quietly, I want to be there. Clara. He's been hunting me for 500 miles. I'm done being prey. She met Silas's eyes. I want him to see my face when he realizes he's lost. Something shifted in Silas's expression. Respect maybe, or recognition. All right, he said, but you stay behind me until I say otherwise. Fair enough. Patience's fever broke at 3 in the morning. Clara was dozing in the chair beside her bed when she felt her daughter's hand move in hers. Mama. Clara's eyes flew open. Patience was looking at her, still pale and weak, but coherent. Present. I'm here, baby. I'm right here. I had the strangest dream. Patience's voice was barely a whisper. A lady in white kept trying to take me somewhere, but I told her I couldn't go. I told her my family needed me. Clara's eyes burned with tears. And what did she say? She said that was a good reason to stay. Patience squeezed her mother's hand weakly. So I stayed. Clara gathered her daughter close, crying into her hair, relief and exhaustion and love, all tangled together in her chest. Her daughter was alive. Her daughter had fought and won. Now it was Clara's turn to fight. Dawn came, gray and cold mist rising from the fields like ghosts. Clara stood on the porch beside Silas, wearing one of his late wife's dresses, because it was the closest thing she had to armor. The men were positioned and ready. Eleanor had taken the children to the root cellar, armed with a pistol and strict instructions to shoot anyone who tried to come down the stairs. You don't have to do this, Silas said quietly. You could go with them. Stay safe. I've been staying safe for 3 years. It hasn't made me feel any safer. Stubborn woman. I've been told that before. The riders appeared through the mist like figures from a nightmare. 3 men on horseback, moving slow and deliberate. And at the front, Victor Crane himself. Clara recognized him immediately, the scar that ran from his eyebrow to his jaw. The way he sat his horse like he owned every inch of ground beneath him. The cold, calculating eyes that had looked at her in that Missouri parlor and seen not a woman, but a commodity. Well, well. Victor reined his horse to a stop about 20 yards from the porch. Clara Belle Winslow, you've led me on quite a chase. Mr. Crane. Clara was proud of how steady her voice sounded. I'd say it's good to see you, but my mother taught me not to lie. Victor's lips curled in what might have been a smile. Still have that sharp tongue, I see. Horace always did say you had more spirit than sense. Horace is dead. Yes, he is, but his debts aren't. Victor's gaze swept the porch, taking in Silas and his rifle. And it seems you've found yourself a protector. How predictable. This is private property, Silas said. You weren't invited. I don't need an invitation to collect what I'm owed. You're not owed anything here. Whatever business you had with her husband died with him. Victor laughed, the sound as cold as the morning air. That's not how debt works, friend. Horace Winslow owed me $8,000. He paid off some of it, but there's still a considerable balance. And his widow, Victor's eyes returned to Clara, is the collateral. I'm nobody's collateral. That's where you're wrong. Victor leaned forward in his saddle. Your husband signed a contract, legal and binding. If he couldn't pay his debts, his wife and daughters would work them off in my establishment. It's all very official. There's nothing official about trading human beings. Tell that to the sheriff who witnessed the signature. Victor's smile widened. I have the law on my side, Mrs. Winslow. Do you? Clara felt the ground shifting beneath her. The contract. She'd almost forgotten about the contract. Horace had mentioned it once, drunk and laughing, saying he'd signed away everything to Victor Crane, including her. That contract was signed under duress, she said. It won't hold up in any legitimate court. Perhaps, but we're a long way from any legitimate court, aren't we? Victor gestured at the empty land around them. Out here, the only law that matters is the one with the most guns. Then I guess it's fortunate I've got more guns than you. The voice came from behind Victor. He turned in his saddle to find Jacob and 3 other men emerging from the mist rifles aimed and ready. More men appeared from the sides. Ranchers, farmers, townspeople. Clara didn't recognize all of them. Armed, all of them focused on Victor Crane and his men. "What is this?" Victor's voice lost some of its smoothness. "This is Bitter Creek, telling you you're not welcome here." Silas stepped to the edge of the porch. "Mrs. Winslow and her children are under our protection. Whatever claim you think you have died the moment you set foot on my property. You can't just—" "I can. I am." Silas raised his rifle. "Now you have a choice. You can ride out of here peacefully and never come back. Or you can push your luck and see how many of your men survive the next 5 minutes." Victor's face contorted with rage. For a moment, Clara thought he would attack anyway. Consequences be damned. She saw his hand twitch toward the gun at his hip, saw his men exchanging uncertain glances. Then one of them spoke. "Mr. Crane, maybe we should—" "Shut up." "But sir, there's at least a dozen of them. This isn't what we—" "I said shut up." Victor's eyes never left Clara's face. "You think this is over? You think hiding behind a bunch of dirt farmers makes you safe?" "I think it makes me safer than I was yesterday," Clara said. "And I'll take that. I'll come back. I always come back. Then you'll find the same welcome waiting for you." Silas's voice was flat and final. "Now get off my land before I decide you're not worth the bullets it would take to kill you." Victor held his ground for one more heartbeat. Then slowly, he turned his horse. "This isn't over," he said to Clara. "Debts have a way of coming due." "So do sins," Clara replied. "I'd start making peace with yours if I were you." Victor's face twisted with hatred, but he rode away, his men following close behind, disappearing into the mist like the nightmare they were. Clara's legs gave out the moment they were gone. Silas caught her before she hit the ground, his strong arms wrapping around her as the tension of the past hours finally released. She buried her face in his chest and sobbed great racking cries that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than her body. "It's all right," Silas murmured into her hair. "You're safe. You're all safe. He'll come back," he said. "Let him try." Silas held her tighter. "Let him try, and he'll learn what happens to men who hunt in Thornton territory." Around them, the other men were dispersing, heading back to their own homes and families. But several stopped to clasp Silas's shoulder to nod at Clara with something like respect. "You did good, ma'am," one of them said, an older man with a weathered face and kind eyes. "Took guts to stand up to a man like that." "I had help." "That's how it works out here." The man tipped his hat. "We look out for each other. Welcome to the community." He walked away before Clara could respond. But his words stayed with her, settling into a place she hadn't known was empty. Welcome to the community. She'd never been welcomed anywhere. Not really. Not since she was a girl before Horace, before everything went wrong. She'd been tolerated, endured, occasionally pitied. But welcomed. That was something new. The children came pouring out of the house the moment Eleanor declared it safe. Clara found herself surrounded by small bodies and anxious voices, everyone talking at once. "Mama, are you okay? Did the bad man leave? Is it over? Patience wants to know what happened." Clara answered as best she could, reassuring and comforting and checking each face for signs of trauma. But it was Sam's reaction that surprised her most. Her 12-year-old son walked up to Silas and stuck out his hand. "Thank you," Sam said, his voice cracking between boy and man. "For protecting us, for not letting him take Mama." Silas shook the offered hand with solemn gravity. "You're welcome. But you should know you protected your family too. Standing up to Ezra the way you did, keeping your head when everyone else was losing theirs. That takes courage." Sam's eyes widened. "You saw that?" "I see everything that happens on my land." Silas released Sam's hand. You've got the makings of a good man, Samuel. Don't let anyone tell you different. Clara watched her son stand a little straighter, his shoulders squaring with newfound pride. That she thought was worth everything they'd been through. Worth the fear and the running and the uncertainty. Watching her boy learn that manhood wasn't about violence and control. It was about protection and responsibility, and standing up for what was right. Later that evening, after the children were fed and settled and Patience was sleeping peacefully, Clara found Silas on the porch again. The spot seemed to be his sanctuary, the place where he came to think. Can I join you? He moved over without speaking, making room for her on the bench. They sat in silence for a while, watching the stars emerge one by one. Thank you, Clara finally said. For today. For everything. You don't have to keep thanking me. Yes, I do. Because nobody's ever... Her voice broke. Nobody's ever fought for me before. Not like that. Silas turned to look at her, his gray eyes soft in the starlight. Then everyone you've known before was a fool. Maybe. Or maybe I wasn't worth fighting for. That's the biggest lie you've ever told. Silas reached over and took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle around hers. You're worth more than you know, Clara Belle Winslow, and I plan to spend as long as it takes proving it to you. Victor will come back. Probably. He won't stop until he gets what he wants. Then we'll stop him first. Silas's grip tightened. But that's a problem for tomorrow. Tonight, I just want to sit here with you and be grateful that you're safe. Clara leaned into his side, feeling his warmth, his strength, his steadiness. She thought about the road that had brought her here, the fear and the pain and the endless running. And she thought about what it might mean to stop running, to plant herself somewhere and grow. Silas. That offer you made, about staying, working for wages. It still stands. I want to accept it. Clara looked up at him. Not because I have no other choice, but because I want to. Because this place, these people, it feels like something I could belong to. Silas's face broke into a smile, the first real smile she'd ever seen from him. It transformed his weathered features, made him look younger, lighter. Then stay, he said simply. Stay, and let's see what we can build together. Clara smiled back, and for the first time in 3 years, the expression didn't feel forced. Together, she agreed. I think I could get used to that. Above them, the stars wheeled slowly through the Wyoming sky, indifferent to the small dramas playing out beneath them. But for Clara and Silas, sitting on a worn porch bench, with their hands intertwined, those stars felt like a promise. A promise that the darkness wouldn't last forever. A promise that dawn was coming. The weeks that followed Victor Crane's retreat were the strangest of Clara's life. For the first time in 3 years, she woke each morning without fear. No listening for footsteps in the dark. No planning escape routes. No counting her children to make sure none had been taken in the night. Instead, she woke to the smell of coffee brewing and the sound of her children laughing in the yard. Mama, watch this. Faith was climbing the fence rail, her blonde braids flying. Sam taught me how to balance. Be careful, baby. I am being careful. See, I'm... Faith wobbled arms pinwheeling and would have fallen if Ezra hadn't caught her. Got you, the teenager said gruffly. Try again. This time don't look down. Clara watched her youngest daughter accept help from Silas's son, and something warm spread through her chest. 3 weeks ago, Ezra had called her children stray dogs. Now he was teaching Faith how to balance on fence rails, and helping Sam with the horses, and even on one memorable occasion reading aloud to Charity when she'd had a nightmare. He's not so bad, Maggie said, coming to stand beside her mother. Once you get past the prickly exterior. Most people aren't once you get past their exterior. You sound like Mr. Thornton. Do I? Clara smiled slightly. I suppose I've been around him enough to pick up his habits. Maggie gave her mother a knowing look. Is that all you've picked up? Margaret Ann Winslow, what exactly are you implying? Nothing. But Maggie was grinning. Just that you smile more when he's around, and he smiles more when you're around. And the little ones have started calling him Papa Silas when they think no one's listening. Clara's heart stuttered. They have. Faith started it, then Hope. Now even Benny does it and he barely talks at all. Maggie's expression softened. They're happy here, Mama. We all are. Is that so bad? No, Clara said quietly. That's not bad at all. The Bitter Creek Fall Fair was announced on a Tuesday morning, posters plastered all over town, advertising livestock competitions, baking contests, and a dance in the evening. Clara was in Eleanor's store when she saw the notice, and something flickered in her chest that might have been interest. You should enter, Eleanor said, following her gaze. The baking competition. Your biscuits would win hands down. I don't know. I'm not exactly popular around here. You're more popular than you think. Eleanor leaned across the counter. People have been talking about how you stood up to Victor Crane, how you didn't run when you could have. That counts for something in these parts. Does it count for more than being the widow with 9 children who showed up out of nowhere? It's starting to. Eleanor smiled. Give them a chance, Clara. Give yourself a chance. Clara thought about it all the way home. She was still thinking about it when Silas found her in the kitchen that evening, staring at the flour bin like it held the secrets of the universe. You're contemplating something, he observed. I can always tell. You get this little furrow between your eyebrows. Eleanor thinks I should enter the baking competition at the fair. I think Eleanor's right. Clara turned to face him. You do? Your biscuits are the best I've ever tasted. Better than Catherine's, though I'd deny saying that if anyone asked. Silas moved closer, leaning against the counter. Why not enter? What's the worst that could happen? I could lose. So losing's not the end of the world. Or I could win, and have everyone whisper about how the charity case from Missouri thinks she's better than them. Is that what you're really afraid of? Silas's voice was gentle. That people won't accept you. Clara's throat tightened. I've never been accepted anywhere. Every place I've ever lived, I've been the outsider. The one who didn't quite fit. Maybe that's because you never stayed long enough to find your place. Maybe. Silas reached out and took her hand. His calloused fingers warm around hers. Enter the competition. Show them who Clara Belle Winslow really is, and if anyone whispers, I'll be right there to whisper back. Clara laughed despite herself. That's not how social acceptance works. It is in Bitter Creek. The morning of the fair dawned bright and clear, as if the weather itself had decided to cooperate. Clara had been up since before sunrise baking batch after batch of biscuits until she achieved perfection. 6 dozen golden rounds, light as air and buttery as sin, packed carefully in baskets lined with clean cloth. Those look amazing, Josie breathed, peeking over Clara's shoulder. You're definitely going to win. We'll see. You are. I can feel it. The whole family went to the fair together. All 9 of Clara's children, Silas, and even Ezra, who grumbled about crowds, but came anyway. They made quite the procession walking through town, Clara in her best dress, Silas tall and steady beside her children, streaming behind them like a parade. People stared. Clara expected that. But what she didn't expect was the nods of greeting, the tentative smiles, the murmured hellos from people who'd turned away from her just weeks ago. Morning, Mrs. Winslow. That was Thomas Reed, one of the ranchers who'd helped defend the homestead. Looking forward to trying those famous biscuits. Morning, Mr. Reed. I hope they live up to their reputation. I'm sure they will. At the baking competition tent, Clara found herself surrounded by other entrants. Women she recognized from church and town, some friendly, some less so. And there, holding court near the judge's table, was Prudence Blackwood. Clara had heard about Prudence, the wealthy widow who'd had her eye on Silas since Catherine's death, the woman who'd been spreading rumors about Clara's character since the day she arrived in Bitter Creek. "Well, well," Prudence's voice carried across the tent. "Look who decided to show her face. I didn't realize they were letting just anyone enter the competition these days." Several women shifted uncomfortably. Eleanor, who'd been helping Clara carry her baskets, stepped forward with fire in her eyes. "Prudence Blackwood, you close that mean mouth of yours before I close it for you." "I was merely observing. You were merely being cruel, which seems to be your only talent." Eleanor placed Clara's biscuits on the entry table with pointed precision. "Some of us were raised to judge people by their character, not their circumstances." Her character. She's living with a man she's not married to, with 9 children. Do I need to spell out what that suggests? It suggests she's working as a housekeeper to support her family. Something you'd know nothing about seeing, as you've never worked a day in your life. Prudence's face flushed red. "How dare you?" "I dare because someone needs to." Eleanor turned to face the other women in the tent. Clara Winslow has been through more hardship than most of us could imagine. She walked 500 miles with 9 children to escape a monster. She stood up to Victor Crane when he came to drag her back. She's worked her fingers to the bone, making an honest life for her family. That's character. That's courage. And I, for one, am proud to call her my friend. The tent went silent. Clara felt tears prick her eyes as she looked at Eleanor. This woman who'd barely known her but was willing to fight for her anyway. Then slowly, other women began to speak. "Eleanor's right." That was Mrs. Patterson, the preacher's wife. "I've seen how Mrs. Winslow cares for those children. That's not a woman of loose morals. That's a mother doing what mothers do." "She helped Doc Wheeler with the Thompson baby last week," another woman added. "Stayed up all night when Mary Thompson was too exhausted to keep watch. And she's been teaching the Miller children their letters, free of charge." One by one they spoke up. Women Clara barely knew defending her to a woman who'd never given her a chance. The support was overwhelming, almost more than Clara could bear. Prudence looked around at the shifted allegiances, her expression darkening with each voice of support. "You'll all regret this," she hissed. "Allying yourselves with trash from Missouri." "The only trash I see here is the kind that comes wrapped in silk and snobbery." Eleanor crossed her arms. "Now why don't you run along, Prudence? I hear there's a quilting bee you can go ruin somewhere." Prudence gathered her skirts and swept out of the tent. Her exit met with conspicuous silence. The moment she was gone, several women burst into laughter. "That was long overdue," Mrs. Patterson said, patting Clara's shoulder. "That woman's been terrorizing this town for years. It's high time someone put her in her place." "Thank you," Clara managed. "All of you. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. Just make sure those biscuits win." Prudence entered her pound cake, and I'd pay good money to see her face when she loses to you. The judging happened that afternoon. Clara stood with her family, trying not to appear as nervous as she felt. Silas's hand found the small of her back, a warm, steady presence. "Whatever happens," he murmured, "I'm proud of you for being here." "I'm proud of me too." "Is that arrogant?" "No. That's growth." The head judge, a distinguished gentleman from a neighboring county, cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've sampled some truly exceptional baking today. But one entry stood above the rest. For perfect texture, golden color, and flavor that transported all 3 judges back to our mother's kitchens. First place in the biscuit category goes to Mrs. Clara Winslow." For a moment, Clara couldn't move. Then Sam was whooping, and Faith was jumping up and down, and all her children were converging on her at once, hugging and celebrating. She caught Eleanor's eye across the tent and saw the older woman wiping away tears. Clara walked forward to accept her blue ribbon, her head held high. She could feel eyes on her from all directions. Curious eyes. Approving eyes. And yes, some jealous and hostile eyes too. But she didn't let them matter. Thank you, she said to the judge. This means more than you know. Your biscuits earned it, ma'am. Pure and simple. She walked back to her family, the ribbon clutched in her hand like a treasure. Silas was smiling that rare full smile that transformed his weathered face. Told you, he said. Don't gloat. It's unbecoming. I'm not gloating. I'm celebrating. There's a difference. The evening dance was held in the largest barn in Bitter Creek, transformed for the occasion, with lanterns and bunting and hay bales pushed against the walls. A small band played lively tunes while couples spun across the makeshift floor. Clara stood at the edge of the crowd, watching her children enjoy themselves. Sam had been dragged into a reel by one of the Patterson girls. Maggie was dancing with Thomas Reed's oldest son. Even Ruth, prickly Ruth, was smiling as she tried to teach Hope the steps. Dance with me. Clara turned to find Silas holding out his hand, his expression somewhere between hopeful and terrified. I don't know how. Neither do I. We can figure it out together. She placed her hand in his and let him lead her onto the floor. They were awkward at first, stepping on each other's feet, laughing at their mistakes. But slowly they found their rhythm, moving together like they'd been doing it for years. People are watching, Clara murmured. Let them watch. They're going to talk. They already talk. Might as well give them something worth talking about. Silas pulled her slightly closer. Clara, I need to tell you something. Her heart stuttered. What is it? I've been thinking about us, about what we are to each other, and I've come to a decision. Silas, let me finish, please. He took a breath. When Catherine died, I thought that part of my life was over. The part where I could love someone, build a future with someone. I figured I'd raise Ezra, run the ranch, and die alone. And I was at peace with that. But then you showed up with your 9 children and your fierce eyes and your determination to survive no matter what. And you made me feel things I thought were dead. His grip on her hand tightened. I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. I know you've been hurt. I know trust doesn't come easy. But I want you to know that when you are ready, if you ever are, I'll be here. Clara's eyes filled with tears. What are you saying? I'm saying I'd like to court you, properly, with intention. He swallowed hard. I'm saying I'm falling in love with you, Clara Bell Winslow, and I think maybe you might be falling too. The music swelled around them, other couples spinning past in colorful blurs. But for Clara and Silas, the world had narrowed to just the two of them. I'm scared, she whispered. I know. My husband made me promises too. He said he loved me, and then he... She couldn't finish. I'm not him. Silas's voice was fierce. I will never be him. And if you'll let me, I'll spend the rest of my life proving that. Clara looked at this man who'd saved her and her children, who'd fought for them and defended them and never once asked for anything in return, who looked at her like she was precious when she'd spent years believing she was worthless. Ask me again, she said softly. In a few months, when the newness has worn off and you've seen me at my worst. And if I still want to court you, then I'll say yes. Silas's face broke into that transformative smile. I'll ask, every month if I have to, until you believe that I'm not going anywhere. You're a stubborn man, Silas Thornton. You're a stubborn woman, Clara Winslow. He spun her carefully, bringing her back into his arms. I figure we're well matched. They danced until the music stopped, until the lanterns burned low, until the children were yawning and ready for bed. And when they finally loaded everyone into the wagon for the ride home, Clara sat beside Silas with her blue ribbon in her pocket and something new in her heart. Hope. Not the fragile hope she'd carried for years, the kind that expected to be disappointed, but something stronger, something that felt like it might survive. The weeks after the fair passed in a blur of activity. Harvest season demanded everyone's attention, And Clara found herself working alongside the ranch hands, cooking for extra workers, preserving vegetables for winter. Her children threw themselves into the work with enthusiasm that surprised her. "Mama Jacob says I'm a natural with horses," Sam reported one evening, his face glowing with pride. "He says if I keep practicing, I might be able to help with the spring roundup." "That's wonderful, baby." "I'm not a baby," Sam said automatically, but he was grinning. "I'm the man of the house." "You're one of the men of the house," Clara corrected. "Silas is the other." Sam considered this. "I guess that's fair. He's all right, isn't he? For a grown-up." "He's more than all right." "You like him?" It wasn't a question. Like him. The way Mrs. Patterson likes Mr. Patterson." Clara felt her cheeks warm. "Would that be so bad?" "No." Sam's voice was serious. "He's nothing like Pa. He doesn't yell or throw things or make you cry. He just fixes stuff and helps and teaches me things without making me feel stupid." "Your father had his own demons, Sam." "I know, but his demons aren't my problem anymore." Sam looked at his mother with eyes far too old for his 12 years. "I want you to be happy, Mama. I want all of us to be happy. And if Mr. Thornton makes you happy, then I'm glad." Clara pulled her son into a hug, feeling him stiffen briefly before relaxing into her arms. He was growing up so fast. Too fast. But maybe in this place with these people, he could finally grow up right. "I love you," she whispered. "Love you too, Mama, even when you're embarrassing." Ezra's transformation was slower, but no less remarkable. The prickly teenager who'd called Clara's children strays had become something else entirely. Not soft exactly, but present. Engaged. Like he'd finally decided to participate in life instead of just watching it pass. "Miss Clara." He found her in the kitchen one afternoon, his expression uncertain. "Can I talk to you?" "Of course. What's on your mind?" Ezra shifted his weight from foot to foot. "I wanted to apologize for what I said about your family, about you being strays." "You already apologized for that." "I know, but I didn't mean it then. Not really. I just said the words because Pa made me." He looked down at his boots. "I mean it now. I was wrong. You're not strays. You're family." Clara's throat tightened. "That's a big word, Ezra. Family." "I know. But it's true, isn't it? The little ones, they call me brother sometimes. Faith asked if I could teach her to read better. And Charity, she drew me a picture of a horse for my birthday." "Did she?" "Yeah." Ezra's voice cracked slightly. "No one's made me a birthday present since Ma died. I didn't even remember it was my birthday until Charity gave me that drawing." Clara reached out and touched his arm. "Your mother would be proud of the young man you're becoming." "You think so?" "I know so." Ezra nodded, blinking rapidly. "I just wanted you to know that I'm glad you're here, that I'm glad Pa found you." He turned and fled before Clara could respond, the tips of his ears red with embarrassment. She watched him go, her heart full of something that felt like gratitude and wonder and the beginning of love. The first snow came early that year, catching everyone off guard. Clara woke one morning to find the world transformed, blanketed in white that sparkled in the weak sunlight. Snow. Faith's shriek of joy echoed through the house. "Mama, it's snow." Within minutes, all 9 of Clara's children were outside building snowmen and throwing snowballs and catching flakes on their tongues. Their laughter rang through the cold air like bells. Silas found Clara on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching her children play. "They're happy," he observed. "They are. Are you?" Clara considered the question. She thought about the fear she'd carried for so long. The running, the hiding, the constant vigilance. She thought about Horace and Victor, and all the men who'd tried to break her. And she thought about this place, this home she'd somehow stumbled into. The children who were thriving, the community that had accepted her, the man standing beside her, who looked at her like she mattered. "Yes," she said. "I think I am." Silas smiled that rare smile. "Good." "Silas. It's been 2 months since the fair." His expression sharpened with interest. "Has it? You said you'd ask again, about courting me." "I did say that." "Well," Clara turned to face him. "Are you going to ask?" Silas set down the coffee cup he'd been holding. He took both her hands in his gray eyes intense. "Clara Belle Winslow," he said formally. "I've watched you transform my house into a home. I've watched you love my son when he didn't deserve it. I've watched you stand up to monsters and win blue ribbons and become someone this whole town respects." "Silas, let me finish." He squeezed her hands. "I told you I was falling in love with you. That's not true anymore." Clara's heart dropped. "Oh. That's not true anymore because I'm not falling. I've fallen. Completely. Irrevocably." His voice roughened. "I love you, Clara. I love your children. I love this chaotic, beautiful life we've built together. And I'm asking formally for permission to court you, to prove to you that not all men are monsters, to show you what love can look like when it's not twisted by cruelty and fear." Tears were streaming down Clara's face, but she was smiling. "Yes. Yes. Yes, Silas Thornton, you can court me." She laughed through her tears. "Though I should warn you, you're taking on a woman with 9 children and enough baggage to fill your barn. I've got a big barn, and I'm stubborn and proud, and I don't trust easily. I'm patient. And I might never be able to love you the way you deserve." Silas cupped her face in his hands, wiping her tears with his thumbs. "That's where you're wrong," he said softly. "You already love more fiercely than anyone I've ever known. You just haven't learned to let that love include yourself." Clara had no words for that, so she did something she'd never done before. She rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was brief and gentle, barely a brush of warmth, but it felt like a beginning. "Well then," Silas said when she pulled back, "I guess we're officially courting." "I guess we are." "The children are going to be insufferable about this." "Probably." "Ezra's going to pretend he doesn't care while secretly being thrilled." "Almost certainly." Silas grinned. "Worth it." Clara looked out at her children still playing in the snow, at this house that had become home, at this man who'd shown her what love could be. "Yes," she agreed. "Definitely worth it." Winter settled over Bitter Creek like a blessing in disguise. The snow that had trapped them on the ranch also kept Victor Crane away, and for the first time in years, Clara allowed herself to stop looking over her shoulder. There was too much living to do. Silas courted her properly, the way he'd promised. He brought her wildflowers he'd somehow found growing in the protected hollow behind the barn. He carved a wooden box for her to keep her few precious belongings. He sat with her on the porch every evening, talking about everything and nothing, learning the shape of her thoughts. "Tell me about your mother," he said one night, his breath fogging in the cold air. "She died when I was 12. Fever took her." Clara pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "She was the last person who made me feel like I mattered. Until now, I hope." Clara looked at him, this man who'd changed everything. Until now. The children adapted to the courtship with varying degrees of enthusiasm. The younger ones were openly delighted, already calling Silas Papa without reservation. The older ones were more cautious, but even Ruth had stopped glaring whenever Silas entered a room. "If you break her heart," Ruth informed him one evening, "I'll make your life miserable." "Ruth." Clara was horrified, but Silas just nodded solemnly. "I would expect nothing less, and I'd deserve every bit of it." Ruth studied him for a long moment. Then grudgingly she said, "You're not as bad as I thought you'd be." High praise indeed. Don't let it go to your head. Christmas came with more celebration than Clara had experienced in years. Silas had somehow found presents for every child, small things mostly but thoughtful. A new ribbon for Faith's hair. A book of poetry for Josie. A hunting knife for Sam presented with a solemn discussion about responsibility. For Clara, he gave a simple gold locket. Inside was a tiny photograph of her children taken without her knowledge by the traveling photographer who'd passed through town the month before. "So you'll always have them close to your heart," Silas said, "even when they're grown and scattered." Clara cried. She'd been doing a lot of that lately, but these were different tears. Happy tears, grateful tears. "I have something for you, too," she managed, pulling a package from behind her chair. "It's not much, but—" Silas unwrapped the gift carefully. Inside was a quilt pieced together from fabric scraps Clara had collected over months. Each square was different, some from her children's outgrown clothes, some from fabric Eleanor had given her, one from a dress that had belonged to Catherine. "I found it in the attic," Clara explained nervously. "The dress. I hope you don't mind. I thought maybe she'd want to be part of our family even now." Silas traced the familiar fabric with trembling fingers. This was her favorite dress. She wore it the day Ezra was born. "I can take it out if—" "No," his voice cracked. "No, it's perfect. She would have loved this. She would have loved you." "I hope so. I know so." Silas looked up, his gray eyes bright with emotion. "Thank you, Clara, for this, for everything." That night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Silas took Clara's hands in his. "I want to ask you something." Clara's heart stuttered. "What is it?" "I've been thinking about timing, about what's proper and what's not." He took a breath. "Catherine's been gone almost 4 years now. I've mourned her. I'll always love her memory, but my heart's not empty anymore." "Silas, let me finish." He squeezed her hands. "I want to marry you, Clara. Not someday, not eventually. I want to marry you in the spring when the snow melts and the world comes back to life. I want to stand up in front of God and this community and promise to love you for the rest of my days." Clara's tears fell freely now. "You're sure? You're absolutely sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything. I have 9 children. I know. I've counted. I'm damaged, broken in ways you might not even see yet. Then I'll love the broken parts too." Silas cupped her face in his hands. "Clara Bell Winslow, will you marry me?" The word came out before she could second-guess it. "Yes. Yes. Yes." She laughed through her tears. "Yes, Silas Thornton, I'll marry you." He kissed her, then properly deeply, the way she'd dreamed of being kissed when she was young and still believed in happy endings. And somewhere deep inside her, a wound that had been bleeding for years finally began to heal. The news of the engagement spread through Bitter Creek like wildfire. Most reactions were positive congratulations and well wishes from people who'd watched Clara transform from a desperate stranger to a valued member of the community. But not everyone was pleased. "You're making a mistake." Prudence Blackwood cornered Clara in Eleanor's store, her face twisted with something that looked like genuine desperation. "Silas Thornton deserves better than a used-up widow with a horde of children. And you think he deserves you instead. I think he deserves someone of quality, someone who can give him the life he was meant to have." Clara studied the woman before her. The expensive dress, the perfectly styled hair, the eyes that held nothing but emptiness and envy. "You're lonely," Clara said softly. "That's what this is really about, isn't it?" Prudence recoiled. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do. I think you've been alone for so long that you've forgotten how to be anything else. And you hate me because I found what you've been looking for." "I don't hate you." "Yes, you do, but I don't hate you back." Clara touched the other woman's arm gently. "Silas isn't the only good man in this territory. And love isn't something you can take from someone else. It has to be given freely." Prudence's lip trembled. For just a moment the mask slipped, revealing the frightened woman underneath. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "How to just live, without scheming, without fighting. Then learn. It's not too late. Clara stepped back. I spent years believing I was worthless, that I deserved every bad thing that happened to me. I was wrong. And so are you. She walked away, leaving Prudence standing alone in the store. She didn't look back. The winter passed slowly but sweetly. Clara and the children settled into the rhythm of the ranch, no longer guests, but genuine members of the household. The barn that had been their first shelter became storage again, and the children spread throughout the house, sharing rooms and squabbling over blankets and filling every corner with noise and life. It's chaos, Silas observed one morning, stepping over a pile of Sam's boots and dodging Faith, who was chasing Hope through the kitchen. Regrets? Clara asked. Not a single one. He kissed her forehead. I forgot what living felt like. You reminded me. Ezra's transformation continued to astonish everyone. The surly teenager had become something else entirely, a big brother to children who weren't his by blood, but were his by choice. I never had siblings, he confessed to Clara one afternoon. I used to wish for them. Used to pray Ma would have another baby so I wouldn't be alone. And now you have 9. Now I have 9. He grinned, an expression that looked more and more like his father every day. Be careful what you wish for, I guess. Any regrets? Only that they eat all the bacon before I get downstairs. As spring approached, the wedding preparations began in earnest. Clara had insisted on a simple ceremony, but the community had other ideas. Women arrived with fabric for a dress. Eleanor organized a sewing circle. Even the men pitched in, repairing the church and building new benches for the expected crowd. You don't have to do all this, Clara told Eleanor, overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. Yes, we do. Eleanor squeezed her hand. You came to us with nothing, and you gave us everything. You reminded us what community means, what family means. Let us celebrate that. The dress was beautiful. Simple cream-colored cotton with delicate embroidery at the hem, sewn by a dozen different hands. Each woman had contributed something. A button from Mrs. Patterson, lace from Eleanor, a ribbon from the pastor's wife. It was a patchwork of acceptance stitched together with love. You look beautiful, Mama. Maggie stood behind Clara, adjusting the final touches. Like a real bride. I feel like a real bride. I didn't feel that way the first time. This time is different. Yes, Clara agreed. This time is different. The night before the wedding, Clara couldn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at the blue ribbon she'd won at the fair, thinking about the journey that had brought her here. Couldn't sleep either. She looked up to find Silas in the doorway, his hair mussed from tossing and turning. Nervous? She asked. Terrified. He sat down across from her. Not about marrying you. About deserving you. That's funny. I was thinking the same thing in reverse. Then we're well matched in our insecurities. Clara laughed softly. I keep waiting for something to go wrong. For someone to show up and tell me I'm not allowed to be this happy. If they do, I'll shoot them. Silas? I'm mostly joking. He reached across the table and took her hand. Clara, I need you to hear something. Really hear it. I'm listening. You deserve this. Every bit of it. You deserve a home and a family and a man who loves you. You didn't earn it by suffering enough or proving yourself worthy. You deserve it because you exist. Because you're you. Clara's eyes filled with tears. I don't know if I believe that yet. Then I'll believe it for both of us, until you can believe it yourself. They sat together in the quiet kitchen, holding hands across the table, two broken people who'd found a way to be whole together. Morning came with chaos and excitement. The children were up before dawn, too wound up to sleep. Faith couldn't find her good shoes. Sam had outgrown his suit jacket overnight. Benny, who'd started talking more in recent weeks, kept asking questions about what a wedding was and why Mama was wearing a funny dress. It's not funny, Faith protested. It's beautiful. Mama looks like a princess. What's a princess? Someone who lives in a castle and has pretty dresses. Do we live in a castle? We live somewhere better, Clara said, scooping up her youngest son. We live in a home. The ride to church was surreal. Clara sat beside Silas in the wagon, surrounded by children, wearing a dress made by women who'd once turned away from her. A year ago, she'd been running for her life. Now she was riding toward a future she'd never dared imagine. Mama? Charity tugged at her sleeve. The 7-year-old had come so far from the silent, terrified child she'd been. Are you happy? Yes, sweetheart. I'm very happy. Good. Charity smiled, a rare and precious expression. I'm happy too. The church was packed. Every pew was full with more people standing along the walls. Clara recognized faces from the fall fair from Eleanor's store from the group that had defended the ranch against Victor Crane. They'd come to witness this moment, to celebrate this union. Reverend McAllister met them at the door. Ready, Mrs. Winslow? It's about to be Mrs. Thornton, actually. So it is. He smiled warmly. Shall we begin? There was no one to walk Clara down the aisle. Her father had died when she was young, and there was no male relative to give her away. But as she stood at the back of the church, looking at the long walk ahead, hands reached out from every direction. Sam took her right arm. I'll walk you, Mama. Maggie took her left. We both will. Behind them, the other children fell into line. Josie and Ruth. Patience and hope. Charity and faith. Even little Benny toddling along with Ezra's help. Clara walked down the aisle, not alone, but surrounded by the family she'd built from nothing. Every step was a testament to survival. Every step was a middle finger to everyone who'd ever told her she was worthless. Silas waited at the altar, tall and steady, his gray eyes bright with emotion. When Clara reached him, he took her hands like they were precious. You're beautiful, he whispered. You're not so bad yourself. Reverend McAllister began the ceremony, his voice carrying through the silent church. Clara heard the words as if from a great distance. Dearly beloved, holy matrimony, for better or worse. When it came time for vows, Silas spoke first. Clara, I've stood at this altar before. I've made these promises to another woman, and I meant every word. But she's gone now, and my heart refused to stay empty. His voice cracked. You taught me that love doesn't run out. It multiplies. Every child you brought into my home made my life bigger, not smaller. Every day with you makes me want more days. I promise to love you, to protect you, to stand beside you against whatever the world throws at us. And I promise to spend the rest of my life proving that you're worth more than you've ever believed. Clara's tears fell freely. When it was her turn, her voice shook, but the words came anyway. Silas, I came to Bitter Creek with 9 children and no hope. I'd been running so long I forgot there was any other way to live. You showed me different. You gave me a home when I had none. You gave me safety when I'd only known fear. You gave me love when I didn't think I deserved it. She squeezed his hands. I promise to love your son like my own. I promise to honor Catherine's memory and make her proud. I promise to wake up every morning grateful for this life we're building. And I promise to never run again, because I've finally found something worth staying for. Reverend McAllister smiled. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Silas, you may kiss your bride. Silas pulled Clara close and kissed her gentle and deep. While the church erupted in cheers, 9 children surged forward to embrace them, and for a moment Clara was at the center of a tangle of arms and joyful noise. We did it, Silas murmured against her ear. We actually did it. Was there ever any doubt? Constantly. But I'm glad I was wrong. The celebration afterward was everything Clara had never had. Food and music and laughter, children running wild, adults dancing and talking and celebrating. Prudence Blackwood was notably absent, but Clara chose to hope rather than resent. Everyone deserved a chance to find their way. As evening fell, Clara found herself on the church steps watching her family. Sam was teaching some younger boys a card game. Maggie was dancing with Thomas Reed's son. Ruth was actually smiling, engaged in animated conversation with Eleanor. The younger children had formed a pack with other local kids racing around the churchyard in some complicated game only they understood. And Ezra was right in the middle of it all, no longer an only child, no longer isolated by grief. "No regrets?" Silas asked, coming to stand beside her. "I regret that it took me so long to get here. All those years of running, all that time wasted being afraid." "It wasn't wasted. It was surviving. And surviving is what got you here." Clara leaned into his side. "What happens now? Now we go home. We raise our children. We build something that lasts. That's simple. That's simple." He kissed the top of her head. "And that hard. But we'll do it together." They gathered the children as the stars emerged, loading everyone into wagons for the ride home. Clara held Benny on her lap, feeling his small body warm and heavy with sleep. Around her, her other children dozed or chatted quietly, exhausted from the day's excitement. Silas drove with one hand on the reins and the other holding Clara's. Behind them, Ezra helped manage the younger children, his patience seemingly inexhaustible. "Papa Silas." Faith's sleepy voice drifted from the back of the wagon. "Yes, sweetheart." "Are we really a family now, for real?" "For real," Silas confirmed. "Forever." "Good." Faith yawned. "I like being a family." "Me too," Hope added. "Me three," Sam said, trying to sound grown-up and failing. One by one, the other children chimed in, until even Ruth, prickly Ruth, admitted that family wasn't so bad. Clara listened to her children claiming their place in this new life and felt something settle in her chest. Peace, maybe. Or completion. The sense of a long journey finally reaching its destination. The ranch house appeared through the darkness windows, glowing with the lamps Eleanor had left burning. Home. The word had never meant much to Clara before. Now, it meant everything. Silas carried the sleeping children inside while Clara got the older ones settled. When everyone was finally in bed, she walked through the quiet house, touching familiar surfaces. The kitchen she'd reorganized. The table where they gathered for meals. The porch where she and Silas had fallen in love. "Come to bed," Silas called softly from their room. Their room now. Not his. Theirs. Clara paused at the window, looking out at the land that was now her home. Somewhere out there, Victor Crane might still be planning revenge. Prudence Blackwood might be nursing her resentments. The world might be full of people who would never accept a widow with 9 children. But in this house, in this family, Clara was loved. She was valued. She was home. She'd walked 500 miles with 9 children and no hope. She'd faced down monsters and stood up to cruelty. She'd learned to trust again when trust seemed impossible. And she'd found what she'd been searching for her whole life. Not a place. Not safety. Not even love, though she had all those things now. She'd found her worth. Clara turned from the window and walked toward her husband, toward her future, toward the life she'd built from ashes and determination. She was Clara Bell Thornton now. Mother of 10. Wife of one good man. Member of a community that had chosen her as surely as she'd chosen them. She had come to Bitter Creek with nothing but her children and her stubborn will to survive. She had found everything, and she would never be worthless again.